Hello, everyone. I think that you're going to find we have a very intriguing guest for you today on this episode of Gray Matter. He's someone who is a podcaster, but has had a very successful future in the financial world. And if you're like me, there's a lot going on domestically, geopolitically, at that level of economics that is difficult to understand and hard to make sense of. And so our guest today is Bill Walton, and he's got his own podcast now, which focuses on in-depth conversations with leaders, entrepreneurs, and thinkers who offer deep insights into money, culture, and politics. And we're hoping to get him to talk about some of those topics here today on our show. So thanks for being with us, Bill. It's great to meet you.
Oh, it's great to be on. I love you. I love your show. It took a lot of episodes before this, and you've got a good show. So I'm eager to be part of it.
Well, I'm very grateful that you say that, and it's great to have you on. And obviously, you are a guest who can talk about a great many things, but we want to pick your brain about things that are really in your wheelhouse, and we're going to get to that. But as we always do, we're going to start with some of our framing aphorisms, and these are from people that you talk about sometimes on your show, sometimes not favorably. First is George Soros, who says, "I've made my life's mission to destroy the United States. I hate this country, and I hate all the people in it." That's in Newsweek in 1979. And he seems to be has been living out that ambition for the last 45 years. Next, from someone that we like a lot more, C.S. Lewis, who wrote, "Of all
Yeah.
tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive," sort of describing the woke universe in which we hopefully are emerging from. And next, the President Donald Trump, the man of the hour, the man of the world today. He says true leaders take responsibility for the success of the team and understand that they must also take responsibility for the failure. And here's one that actually is from our guest, I think. "You must not overlook the importance of discussions with knowledgeable people, which is much more productive than absorbing or running through masses of documents, because in a short exchange, you can abstract from somebody who has immense knowledge and experience the essence of what he had gained." And that is our mission for today, folks. That's Bill Walton's words, but we're going to turn that upon him. So who is Bill Walton? Well, as I said, he's a podcaster now, but has been very, very successful in the financial world. In 2016 and 2017, Bill led the agency action and landing teams for all the federal economic agencies, Treasury and the IRS, Commerce, USTR, SBC, Social Security, FCC, and other independent financial agencies for the Donald J. Trump transitional team. That's a big job. He also served as chairman of the board and CEO of Allied Capital Corporation from 1997 to 2009, and as chairman until 2010, when the company was successfully merged with Ares Capital. Under his leadership, Allied Capital grew from $600 million in managed assets to $9 billion. Its private equity portfolio held a majority interest in over 20 companies with aggregate revenues of over $5 billion. And it's my understanding he's still involved in many different financial endeavors, very much engaged in the markets and in the economy. And so here we have him. And where I'd like to start, Bill, is with tariffs. Now, um, as you know, the situation with Canada and China and some of the other countries that have been targeted by Mr. Trump's tariffs seem to be very oppressive for the countries who are suffering from them. And there's a serious question of whether or not the tariffs long term are good for America. And in the early going back about 6 months when Donald Trump first came into office and started off with this sort of tariff agenda, there was a negative impact on the markets, but that seems to have really turned around. The markets seem to be at all-time highs. Precious metals are going very well. Bitcoin is going very well. What do you think about tariffs overall, and also about their short and long-term impact for America and the world? What are your thoughts in that regard?
Well, we picked back practically the most complicated piece of economics to talk about. I mean, tariffs tariffs are wildly controversial. There's some people like Donald Trump who believe in them and their effectiveness in protecting countries and building up manufacturing and other skill sets inside countries. And then there are others, free trade economics at the other end of the spectrum, that believe each country ought to do what it does best. And by trading with somebody else who's got a comparative advantage over you, you end up both better off. And that's been the school of thought for most of economic policymakers here in the United States for the last, I don't know, 7,500 years. And tariffs are really off the policy agenda until Donald Trump came along, and he's told us Trump's tariffs not only are important, but they're that's the most important, most beautiful word in the language. And I thought he thought winning was, but we'll go with tariffs for today. And it's unclear how this works. There's a lot of noise in the markets. He announced tariffs, and the market sold off dramatically. There was also enormous fear at that time of inflation taking off. And what's happened during that period, last 6 months, inflation has now quieted itself down. But the other market, which hadn't responded so well, is that the U.S. dollar is now down about 10-12% against a basket of currencies. And if you're an American taking a trip to Europe this summer, it's going to be very expensive. I think it's probably 15, 16% less valuable than it was last summer. And so the currency markets are voting that the tariffs may not be a good thing for the United States. We'll see. It'd be useful. And you know what? I could probably talk for half an hour. I'm going to shut up right there and let you jump
Well,
in. I've got a
well,
lot of places I can take this. We can go
Well,
where you want to
I
go.
think that's a great place to start, though, Bill, because that really kind of sets the ground floor. And a lot of people don't understand tariffs the way someone like you does, with your vast experience in financial markets. I had sent you a piece by a gentleman who had been on our show, a Canadian economist, a really brilliant guy. His name's Jim Thorne, and he said something very interesting about Donald Trump and this whole tariff strategy. He thinks that he describes it as 6 months that changed the world. He thinks that, the strategy that Trump and the Trump administration is employing right now is really taking us out of, this post-World War II, era, and he also, and this is the interesting part, he thinks, and you may agree with this, or you may disagree, he thinks that the Fed, that the Federal Reserve, like many central banks, this is also true in Canada and Great Britain, I think, but he thinks that the Fed, the central bank, has become ideologically driven, and that it was probably not a good idea to begin with, but it's begun to operate itself and manipulate markets based upon an ideology that is essentially socialism. And he thinks what Donald Trump has done has really flipped a switch, and that it's causing the Fed to have to change its behavior and maybe loosening its hold on the economy. What do you think about that?
Well, that's a long question with a short answer. The Fed really shouldn't. No, it's unclear to me whether we even need a Fed. The
Yeah,
country, United States, operated quite effectively for a couple hundred years without a central federal bank, Federal Reserve. It was brought into life in, I think, 1912 or 1914 during the progressive era. And that was where the progressive agenda aligned nicely with the agenda of the big banks in New York. And what they were trying to do is get control of the money supply and credit, most importantly, and develop a dominant moat around their business. And by creating the Federal Reserve, and it's really 12 banks spread around the country, in order to get it done, they had to give Federal Reserve banks to a lot of 12 other cities, spread fairly evenly throughout. And it started out as I guess I would say it was a very agenda driven financial institution whose goal really in modern terms would be to implement a federalist agenda. And over
right.
time, FDR took up that, and we began staffing it with a lot of leftist economists from places like Harvard and MIT. And today the Fed is really dominated by PhDs who went to MIT, and the MIT grads in monetary theory are all significant Keynesians. And to recollect, John Maynard Keynes came along when we had a lot of financial difficulties and wrote his general theory of employment, and he wrote it basically to justify massive federal spending and demand, creating consumer demand, and felt like they could manipulate the economy that way. And it started out as a political creature, and to this day, really it remains one. There was this fiction that. Somehow, that because it does not have any obvious reporting. I mean, it's not like it reports into the president. It is set up as an independent institution, but in Washington, you can be set up as an independent institution, yet the president still has significant sway, or Congress has significant sway over what you do. Uh,
Mhm,
so, yeah,
mhm.
I'd agree with his assessment that it's political, and it is an instrument of the left. And at this point in time, we need the free markets to work in the capital markets and interest rates we pay. And based on the nicely recovering economy, we should have lower interest rates than we do. And yet, Jay Powell, who is a former golfing buddy of mine, uh, has, has
Can't you
stubbornly.
win?
No, he's a better golfer. But
Well, he's a socialist.
I
He has
spend more
more
time
time to golf.
studying I spent more time studying money than he did. He was on the golf course while I was hitting the books.
Yep. Yeah, there you go. There you go. The price
He's a
to
nice
pay
guy,
for
good guy, but
capitalism.
I think he's
Yeah.
surrounded by the propeller heads at the Fed, the PhD
Mhm.
MIT economist, and is very much dominated by by their collective agenda. So
Yeah.
it's a really interesting question, and the Fed has all these headlines, and the question is, what do they really control? Well, they really control the short end of the interest rate curve, 6-month treasuries, for example. The bond market really sets the rates for longer terms, and the bond markets is global, and that's, what they call them, the bond vigilantes. They're the ones that set real interest rates based on what they think
Right.
fundamental economic growth or inflation is going to be. So even though we talk about the Fed a lot, it is not, I don't think it's the powerful institution that people give it credit for.
Mhm, mhm. Well, Donald Trump obviously has a lot of trust in you and your acumen as a financial advisor. But I'm guessing you probably would not have recommended this whole tariff strategy to him in the beginning. Firstly, are you surprised that it's turned out the way it has? And do you think that this sort of tariff agenda or strategy is going to be a long-term one, or do you foresee that perhaps it's a prelude to the forging of more long-lasting trading relationships with countries like China, Canada, and others who right now are sort of suffering from Trump's tariffs? What do you think about that?
Well, a bit of a disclaimer. I work for Donald Trump, but I worked for him in Washington in the transition, and he was up in Trump Tower, and we didn't have that many interactions, and I'm not on the current economic teams. I have another friend, Kevin Hassett, who is
Hmm.
Trump's chief economic advisor, and a more interesting question would be to ask Kevin Hassett before he became Trump's economic advisor. Kevin, what do you think about tariffs? And, when Kevin gets out in front of the camera in front of the White House now, he's all in. He thinks tariffs are great and they're really
Ah,
accomplishing what they want to accomplish. I don't think that's what he would have said a year ago, but then
okay.
he'll have to speak for himself. And, it's I don't see where this is going, frankly. I mean,
Yeah.
everything, yes, the stock market has recovered. I think there's the Magnificent Seven, which or eight or whatever it is, the number of big tech companies that sold off a fair amount because I can't remember what the particular scare was, but they sold off. Now they're coming back. So the equity market's recovered. Uh, but we've got the tariffs out there, but he has said they were an instrument to get countries' attention so he could negotiate better trade arrangements with each country. And that's a
Hmm.
massive undertaking because we've got 150 countries around the world that I think he slapped tariffs on. And I don't know how you go at those one at a time. And I don't know beyond the tariffs what he's trying to negotiate with Canada, for example. That's
Right. Yeah.
again, I have to disclaim a little bit. Trade's never been an area that I've spent an enormous amount of time studying. Frankly, it's the most complicated piece of finance and economics I think there is because there's just so many moving parts. And let me give you an example of why it's so hard. I mean, we slap tariffs on China. I think it's 40% now. At one point, it was going to be 125%.
Hmm.
But what the Chinese entrepreneurs have done, the businesses have decided, well, gee, we're not going to sell it directly. We're going to sell it through Indonesia or Thailand or Vietnam or Malaysia or you name the country. There are lots of
Hmm.
ways you can get your product sold, but not necessarily going from A to B, but going from A to C to D to G, whatever to get the same outcome. And so they're very easy to evade if you're a clever entrepreneur, and there are an awful lot of clever entrepreneurs out there. So it's easy to impose these numbers, but I believe very tough to manage.
Hmm. Hmm. And the other thing that is obviously a different strategy from previous administrations is Donald Trump talks about, for example, in relation to Canada, he talks about the use of economic force, um, which he is using, he says, in order to secure the border with Canada, because we know there are large quantities of drugs and also bad actors who are entering the United States through Canada. That's shameful for Canada, I must say. So that sounds like a worthwhile endeavor, but there's a question of whether or not the use of what he calls economic force. He talks about sort of breaking the back of the Canadian economy, whether that's something that is in the American best interest, because of course there's a great deal of trade, a great deal of commerce that goes back and forth between Canada and the U.S. And more than that, the sort of the deep cultural ties that we have with the United States, the proximity to each other, the military concerns, all of this seems to mitigate in favor of a closer relationship that would beg against the use of economic force. So, this peace through strength, is that something that you think is a worthwhile strategy, a good strategy for the United States, or do you think that perhaps
I
that's
think it
something that caused problems?
I hadn't heard that, but just when you say to me he thinks Trump he's going to break the back of the Canadian economy, I think that's completely reckless, and I don't think he means it. It may be more just Trumpian rhetoric, but
He
that's
does say things he doesn't mean sometimes. We have to say that.
yeah, jaw dropping, and so yeah, I
Yeah.
mean that would be insane. I mean we're our large. I think Canada is our the United States' largest trading partner. I mean
Right. Particularly in terms of
why on earth?
energy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that dairy products are something that are on people's mind. I think there's a big
Yes.
tariff or big. It's difficulty for dairy farmers to sell into Canada. And probably we'd like to see that renegotiated so our dairy farmers have a level playing field. But that's very different from saying I'm going to break the back of the economy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's some other things I don't quite understand, like he's just slapped a 50% tariff on copper. Well,
Yeah.
copper is one of the essential components of a lot of manufacturing you do here in the United States, and we don't make a lot of copper here. I mean, it takes 29 years to get a license to mine copper, and it takes 5 or 6 years to get a license or get through all the regulations to even do a copper smelter. And so, if we slap
Wow.
50% tariffs on companies that are using copper as an input, we're asking them to wait at least 5 years to find another United States domestic supplier to replace the foreign supplier. And then the other thing about
Hmm.
copper is it's not like it's being sold to us by China or other potential enemies. It's sold to us by, I believe, Venezuela, Canada, Mexico. I mean, we're not likely. I don't think anybody views, notwithstanding that rhetoric, I don't think anybody views you as hostiles. I mean, we may have differences, but that's it's not. So I don't see the
Sure.
strategic point of doing that, and yet it's there, and it's less. It leaves every and then there's the other theory about Trump, and I have to keep saying I'm a supporter. I am. I don't understand this though because he loves to count on his quote unpredictability and that he's a
Yes.
better negotiator because you can never figure out what he's going to do next and he'll make a move that nobody understands, and it's in the service of some greater strategy he has in mind, and maybe
Mhm,
copper fits that, but it's not obvious, what his strategy, what his genius may be here.
mm.
We'll see.
How does that
And then
unpredictability affect, the markets, Bill?
well,
That
normally, it's terrible.
unpredictability.
I mean, one of the most important things, and I've been in the private equity business and run small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and one of the things you value the most is having predictability, so you can
Right.
decide where you want to deploy capital. Do you wanna
Mhm.
hire more people? Where do you wanna locate your retail operations? Where do you wanna do this? To have a completely volatile, policy environment where you have a president that's saying, "Well, gee, I think we'll do this policy here and that policy there, and it's gonna change your business model completely." What tends to happen then is that you shut down. You say, "Well, look, I'm just not gonna do anything. I'm gonna sit on my capital and maybe go work on my golf game so I can beat Jay Powell."
A worthwhile endeavor. But, I'm glad you mentioned about, your work in building businesses and investing because, this is where I wanna go next. I wanna talk about your podcast, The Bill Walton Show, and, more than that, I'd like to go maybe, deeper into your biographical history. Obviously, you're somebody who has had a great deal of success, in the financial world. Um, and I'm interested to know not only your own history and how you got started in that, but then the idea of having your own podcast, and the genesis of that, and why you're doing it. So maybe we could start if you could go deep into the archives and tell us a little bit about your history and how you became such a successful business person. I think this would be a very inspiring story for many of our viewers and listeners.
Well, let me start with a caution. I didn't I wouldn't recommend going into podcasting for the money. You you mentioned you mentioned my financial
I sus
success.
I suspected that wasn't the reason. Yeah, but
Yeah,
you'll
my
clarify
motivation
that, but I suspected that was the reason. Yeah.
yeah, I've got a lot my motivation for the podcast is I have a lot of curiosity about a lot of things, and there's really no better
Right.
format to grab somebody, and you're doing it with your show, grab somebody who you think is smart and knows something you'd like to know more about, and then find a forum to
Mhm.
share it with other people.
Yeah.
That's the reason I'm doing it, and there's a whole lot of a lot of learning that I've gotten, and frankly, a lot of the things I know now, I know because I've been doing the podcast with people in areas that I wouldn't normally, know much about,
Yeah.
so it's a
That
great
might
way to
be the
do it.
best part of doing it. Yeah. I get to meet
Yeah.
amazing people like you. I would never get a chance to talk to someone like you. But for podcasting, honestly, it's been one of the greatest, learning experiences of my life, and, this is what I enjoy so much is talking with people like you, but how did you get involved in finance and investing? Was that something that you always wanted to do, started out very young, or how did you become so successful in business?
Well, I well, in the first place, I didn't grow up with much money. My family lived in a very modest house in Indianapolis, and I went to the high school in the near city suburbs. It was 80% black, and I went to public schools, both grade school, high school, and then I went to Indiana University and was down there. But I was blessed with I do well on my math test scores. I'm good.
This seems to be a particular trait of guys who are great in finance. They're great with their math.
I'm
You
good in
now I'm
math.
I'm assuming another cliche, I'm assuming you're a Hoosier, you're a big basketball fan, or is that
Oh, I
over the
am.
mark?
I am. I am. And I sort of enjoy having the same name as a basketball player who I thought was a strange and
He was a great
unusual
one.
person, but a great player,
Yeah.
great player. A lot of
Mhm.
fun to watch him play with the Celtics as a 6th man.
Yes.
Uh, um, so yeah, I've got you can't get out of Indiana unless you've got at least a decent jump shot. Um
But
Oh,
can
you
you
played
dunk,
hockey.
Bill?
You played hockey.
Oh, yes.
Same thing for you. You
Same
gotta
thing.
be able I
Mhm.
don't know what the move is in hockey, but you gotta have mastered that to be a decent Canadian.
Yeah. Maybe the slap shot.
Slap shot, okay.
Yeah,
You gotta
yeah,
have a
there
good
you
slap
go.
shot.
Yeah.
So I've always been very good at math but I've had a lot of curiosities, and I was, I got I dropped out of school when I was in my sophomore year. I just got bored and
Really?
wanted to do other things. Yeah, and I ended up getting drafted, uh, and ended up at Fort Knox in basic training, and then, as I said, I do well on standardized tests and through various events. I ended up at the Pentagon. So instead of I was Vietnam era, so instead of ending up at the Pentagon, I ended up ending up in Vietnam. I ended up at the Pentagon doing I was a clerk. And and, uh,
Really?
pretty boring, and so I wa reading the Washington Post one Sunday morning, and they said, "Well, there's this acting company in DC, and we're looking for people to join," and so I joined an acting company in DC while I was in the Army and did that, and then thought maybe it was a good idea to go back and get a get a college degree after I got out of the Army, so I went back to, Indiana, finished my degree, and also acted in some plays, back there. I For a long time, I held the box office record at the Indianapolis Civic Theater, and, I can't should I tell you which part I played? I played Little
Tell it.
Donnie Dark in, Butterflies
Okay.
Are Free. I was great. I was my so, but I
So
and then I went to New
did you get
York.
the acting bug? Did you get the acting bug
Oh, I had it, and I
full-fledged
think
or
that's part of the
yeah?
reason I ended up back in podcasting is I
Ah,
enjoyed it, and
yeah.
but I ended up in New York looking at through various things, doing auditions and taking some classes at HB Studio and that thing. I was probably 22 or 23 years old, and then being good at math, I began thinking about the probabilities of ever making a living as an actor versus the probabilities of making a living as a finance guy. And and that's when I decided to go back to business school and then ended up doing well there and ended up in commercial banking and then investment banking and then I think a stint in venture capital and then private equity. Then I ended up being asked to be chairman and CEO of Allied Capital back in the late or in 1996, 97. And that was fun because we owned a lot of different businesses and another passion of mine at the time was education, and we owned, I don't know, 6 or 7 or 8 businesses in education, so I got to be in the finance business, but vicariously experience, being in those industries as well. And,
Mhm.
just one thing
Mhm.
led to another, but I think the common denominator is just, um, I don't know, I got to be pretty good at figuring out what's a good business and what's a bad business, and I think that's
Mhm.
really I actually was thinking today about writing something about that. I I
That's a
wouldn't
talent. That's a talent.
I wouldn't put podcasts on the category of good business. There are a lot
Yeah,
of other benefits, but,
yeah.
I don't think that's gonna make the list.
In a way, just listen to you, it's sort of appropriate. You start out at Fort Knox where all the gold was, and then you
Yeah.
find your way, you then find your way into the financial world. And when you were an
Yeah.
actor, I thought for a second you were an extra in the James Bond film. You remember Goldfinger, and they have all those extras
Oh, gee.
if you remember the film, they all pretend that they've been knocked out so that,
I would have been good at
all the
that.
gold can be stolen. But seriously,
Great
you
movie.
talked
That's a great
about,
movie.
you raised an issue I wanted to take up with you, and that is, obviously, you've done very well in business, worked very hard, but also, in your life, there's been this thread of philanthropy, about, when you talked about starting these educational companies, and then, I was reading, when I was researching you, I read about something called the Absolute Protector Foundation, which is another example of your philanthropy, and really your podcast is too. But what's the Resolute Protector Foundation all about, and why is that important to you?
Well, Resolute Protector is a name I came up with because, I think they're threats to Western civilization, and it's manifesting itself here in the United States and in Western Europe, and I'm a I think other civilizations have made great contributions, I suppose, but I think what we've done here in the West and the, Judeo-Christian ethic and the free market capitalism and limited government and free speech and all those things that we used to take for granted are under threat.
Yes.
And I have been involved in, I was on the board of Heritage Foundation, and I'm now vice chairman of the, CPAC, and I was president of Council for National Policy, another policy group, and was on the board of American Enterprise Institute. So I've been involved in that world and supporting the scholars and activists who are on that side of the argument. And so I set up a 501(c)(3) to fund those, to every I can't do everything myself, and so I needed to have a vehicle to support, other people in this effort to, preserve Western civ.
Yeah. I love CPAC, and if you ever could get me on the guest list, I'd love to attend one of those.
Done,
They're wonderful.
done.
I watch them. I think it's just an incredible concept, and so many brilliant people coming there to speak. You were talking about Western civilization, and this is a topic very close to my heart. We talk a lot about it on this show. But one of the key things, one of the key, I guess, features of the attack on Western civilization is coming through the CCP. And I note
Yeah,
in some of your
yeah.
social media, you've commented on this. You said you posted out the CCP have a very clear goal. And I've been saying this for a very long time. And you say, I encourage you to connect the dots in your own research. And if you are new to my platforms, listen to my past interviews about the CCP tactics. So talk about the infiltration of the Chinese into the United States and how it's impacting, for example, what happened with the Los Angeles mayor in the recent riots.
Well, the CCP, first, the Chinese Communist Party is not the Chinese people as a whole, but the Chinese Communist Party certainly dominates
Right.
China and has forever.
Right.
And it has a theory. I don't know how many warfares it is now, 4 or 5 or 6 warfares. They don't believe that war is fought only with guns and airplanes, but they think
Mm-hmm.
it's fought using political strategies, cultural strategies, financial strategies, and they have all these notions of these different warfares. And the Chinese Communist Party, it almost seems like a Bond film. It's basically organized the society in China to fight this war for Chinese dominance. And it starts with some very interesting views that the Chinese have forever, which is when they were just merely an emperor, they still didn't believe that any other system of laws applied to China. And so when they go
Right.
forth and do business in the world, like the South Sea, they're very aggressive. They don't respect property rights there. They don't really abide by the World Trade Organization. So their notion of law is whatever they say it is, and they don't. Of course, they don't have any justices. So it all comes back to the Politburo and G as to what's right and wrong in China.
Mm-hmm.
They'd like to impose that here. But they've been infiltrating it. One of the ways they've done it, the cultural way, they've done things like what is it? The centers. Oh gosh, in the universe, it was just on the Confucius centers in
Yes.
hundreds of universities to try to convey people that the Chinese do not have an evil intent and that they're doing all these good things, but in fact, it's really just to soften people up to what their real agenda is. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
concern. I share this concern that with Biden's open border, um, we saw perhaps 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 young Chinese men cross into the United States, all wearing pretty much the same kit, and kit's the term for loosely for a military uniform, although
Right.
obviously they weren't dressed like that.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
why are they here? I mean, the immigration policies in China are such that if the Chinese Communist Party does not want you to leave the country, you're not leaving. And so to have
Right.
hundreds of thousands young men come in here, and they've been in here for a year, 2 years, 3 years now, what are they up to? And
Mm-hmm.
is that a sleeper cell? Is it something that, are they we have a very vulnerable electric grid, both here, and in Canada, that somebody could
Yes.
sabotage pretty easily. We've got our food supply is quite vulnerable. Our water supply is quite vulnerable. There are all sorts of ways you could, we're an open society. I know maybe that's the reason George Soros, uh, you know, he has George has problems. I don't, he's, he's, he's but we're an open society, and the benefits of an open society are manifest, but the danger, the risk that they pose because people can go freely and do what they like. If you've got an evil actor at work, and China is an evil actor in this case, we're in an extremely vulnerable position. And then
Right.
we have drones flying across the eastern
Mhm.
seaboard last summer or 2 summers ago, and then what was
Yep.
that balloon about? I mean, the Chinese
Yeah.
balloon that nobody did anything about, and then you question, and then you look at and this is a really tough one for me because I'm a big fan of technology, Silicon Valley research. There are huge numbers of Chinese involved in research universities here in the United States,
Yes.
and
Mhm.
are they here for ill or are they here for good? And how much of what they're doing ends up back with China, who is
Mhm.
notorious for their theft of intellectual property? So
Yeah.
so I think it's something, we all ought to have our antenna raised as high as it possibly can be.
Yeah. No, I think you're right, and another manifestation of this that you commented upon is also, Chinese election interference, and this has happened in Canada. We have proven Chinese interference in our last 3 federal elections. And also in the United States. Kash Patel commented on this recently in June. He said the FBI has located documents which detail alarming allegations related to the 2020 U.S. election, including allegations of interference by the CCP. And you posted that on your webpage. So another one of the hallmarks of Western civilization, at least the way it's been in North America and countries like Canada, and the United States, is the concept of free and fair elections. And that's being compromised by Chinese interference too, isn't it?
Well, and China takes advantage of the fact that, and I'm going to not say this apologetically, the Canadians and the Americans that are nice people. I mean, I mean, we,
Yeah,
we've had a society, a commercial society built on trust and law, and our ability to sort of, compromise and get along with each other. This notion of the America being rugged individualist doesn't understand how this country really grew. We were almost communitarians, which is, I guess, a big word for a community that comes together to build stuff. Uh,
right.
and that's our culture, and
Yeah.
we haven't had a feudal lord, but again, it gets back to being open. That makes us incredibly vulnerable, and when we hold open elections, we hope, and there are lots of ways to manipulate that if you're trusting of others. And I think up to now we've been way too trusting, and unfortunately we've had to sort of say, okay, well, we can't be nice guys, we can't trust everybody, we've got to act like people maybe have got some evil intent and take steps to stop them. And I don't have any there's no magic wand here. I think and that's the reason I named my foundation what I named it, Resolute Protector.
Right.
You gotta be manning the walls, 24/7.
I think that's just a brilliant initiative. And it's exactly what we talk about on our show a lot about doing what we can individually to sort
Yeah.
of walk out the things that we can do that are important to us. But when we're talking about billionaire bad actors, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the topic of Mr. Epstein. And this is I want to get your take on this because um on the one hand it looks on the face of it just like a story about a guy who was a really bad guy who had very strange sexual proclivities and did really bad things to a lot of young women. But it's incredible how this story has become kind of a touchstone is kind of cutting across many different important threads in American life and politics. And it seems to be the first really major, I shouldn't say first, but maybe a major threat to the Trump administration because um, it seems to me, and I am interested to hear what you think about this, that people like Pam Bondi and Donald Trump have really fumbled the ball here in the way that they've handled this whole Epstein thing. I want to get your take on that. First of all, maybe start there. And do you agree with that? Do you think that maybe the Trump team should have taken this more seriously and understood how this story is important in terms of the trust that Americans have for government? Because let's face it, that Biden administration did a lot of damage to the trust that people had for the American and the American government. And of course, Alex Epstein is identified with this whole concept of the deep state. Donald Trump has been talking about clearing the swamp since he came down the golden stairs 10 years ago. So, what do you think about this? First of all, do you agree that maybe Pam Bondi and others could have handled this better than they have recently?
Oh, I so agree with every word you just said. I mean, okay, that's my answer.
Well, let's go a bit deeper. I mean,
No, I'm
do you
kidding
agree
you,
with
but
me? Do you agree with me
no,
then? Then
this
that
is I
yeah,
think Trump is trying to brush this off, and it's
yeah,
a big, big mistake because, let's just stick with Epstein. There's a lot we already know. I mean, in the
right,
first place, his partner was Ghislaine Maxwell's in jail. And what's she in jail for? Well, she's in jail for, I think it's for trafficking and some, I don't know what her specific convictions are. You may know. I know you've
yeah,
got you're a lawyer. I think you're a
hmm
trial lawyer, aren't you?
yes, yes, and the
I hope I
charges that
never
she has.
need you, but if I do, I'm gonna give you a call. You sound like a good one the way you ask questions. Anyway, we've got her. We've got also the young women who were abused during this, and they've
Right.
all had various trials, and they've come out in various different ways.
Mhm.
We've got the partial list that we'd seen before, and then we've have all the statements that have been made, and then we have that incredibly suspicious suicide.
Yep.
Uh, and it just, if you made a movie the audience wouldn't buy what the suicide story was. That would be the plot. I mean,
Mhm.
we'd be trying to find out who really done it,
And
and
do you buy that there's no list, Bill? Do you think there is there must be a
I don't
list.
know whether they've got a piece of paper that looks like, with the
Sure.
names down on a list, but they've gotta have, here's what they have to have. They have to have things like flight logs.
Right.
I mean, when I was, CEO of my company, I will we had a plane that we used to fly around to visit the companies that we owned, and every time we'd bring a new passenger on, we had to give their name to the FAA, and so people would know who's on the plane.
Right.
And and so we have flight logs, and I don't know how they would not have those, so we do know who was going back and forth, or if we didn't, we should. Uh, I'm sure they've got diaries. I'm sure they've got various records. I'm sure they've got recollections of people who worked on Epstein Island. An FBI that's doing its job has got 1,000 places to pick up on who was there. It may not be he carried a little list around in his back pocket. That's not the way these things work, but you could certainly assemble a list of people who, we wanted to look more closely at. And the crime here, we don't know what the crime is. People say, "Oh, well, these are just pictures of pedophiles." Well, that's not it. It's it's the trust factor.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this before, if we don't have trust in each other, if we don't trust in our government, and Americans trust in our government, I'm not sure what it is in Canada, but our trust in our government has fallen from like 85%, in the '50s to, maybe 15 or 20%
Yes.
today, depending on which political party's in.
Mhm.
This is a trust thing, and also the
Yeah.
statements that Kash Patel and Dan Bongino made before they went into the FBI, statements that Trump made,
Right. And
and
JD Vance even.
JD
Mhm.
Vance, and so there's this whole thing where all of a sudden them to turn around and say, never mind, there's nothing to see here." Nobody believes that.
Yeah.
And they don't have enough trust, what was it Stephen Covey said, your emotional bank account or something like that?
Yeah.
it hasn't been built up high enough for us to say, "Oh, okay, well, we're just gonna go along with this, our new marching
Mhm.
orders," and there are a lot of other, things that people have been interested in that governments did, and we had the whole thing about manipulating the Biden White House giving direct orders to federal government agencies to manipulate or to censor or to shut down platforms on social
Yes.
media.
Mhm.
You know,
We
I
just
was
had Dr. Malone on to talk about that.
oh, he's a good
Yeah.
friend. He lives about,
Yeah.
15 miles from here.
Yeah, he's a brilliant guy.
He can
Great
tell you a lot more
conversation.
about it than I
Yeah.
can. But, yeah, so, there's all that whole so this is part of a mosaic, and the big reason, the emotional reason Donald Trump's president is not that he's gonna fix our economy, is that he's going to somehow restore trust in our
Yes.
institutions.
That's what Biden
And
promised, remember?
wow. Well, we all know Biden will say anything. Of course, Trump
Yeah,
will say any
but
Trump
his doctor won't say anything. He's taking the fifth when he's asked
oh,
about,
my. Oh,
that's astonishing. But on this Epstein thing, you brought up some of the names, people like, Dan Bongino and, Kash Patel. These people, as you say, have been very outspoken about demanding answers, going as far as to say, there's a list and there's a cover up, and it
right.
extends to the highest levels, to princes, to presidents, to prime ministers, to famous movie stars. And then, and so this is the difficulty I have is when I look at someone like Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, who I've followed for years, and
Yeah,
JD Vance, my trust level with them in terms of them having integrity is pretty high. And
right.
so when they tell me that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide, that there's no list, that we know everything we're going to know about the situation, it's very hard to distrust what they say. I mean, you almost have to come out and do what Tucker Carlson is doing, and basically saying that they're liars and that Epstein was connected to Mossad. So it's very hard to make sense of all of this. But what you said, I think, is very true. And I think maybe this is something that the Trump team had underestimated, and that is how deep this goes to the trust level that the American people have for government. And so that's something that the Trump team is going to have to rehabilitate. Do you think they're going to be able to do that? And if so, how are they going to do that?
I worry that Donald Trump does not have people around him right now who can tell him that.
Ah, yeah, yeah. And will he listen? I mean, does he
And
have
will he
people?
listen?
Yeah.
And, his chief of without getting into who the people are, I mean, I it just and these are people I like, but
Yeah.
he's not and he's riding on a 6-month high of this victory and that victory, and now
Yes.
he's got the one big bill. He's really Trump's always been full of himself, but now he's really full of himself. And I don't know that he's really listening. He's he I he put out that first tweet that or something on True Social about just get past it. You guys are ridiculous. Don't pay attention to Epstein. And then he doubled down
Yeah.
just a couple days ago. And so I'm worried. I'm worried that he just is not hearing the music.
Yeah.
And you said it. You said it. This could be the thing that shuts his presidency down.
Yeah. It
Because if he
could.
loses the fervor among the people who were filling those stadiums for 10 years, the
Yeah.
50, 60,000 people he got every time, if they all of a sudden don't trust him
Mhm.
because of this, I think it's over.
Yeah. And the other thing that's worrisome, I mentioned Tucker Carlson is one example of someone who knows the president, has been supportive of MAGA in the past, but now seems to be taking every opportunity to
Yeah,
critique the administration. And he's someone who obviously he's a very smart guy, a very skilled orator and broadcaster, but he's a guy who seems to have a lot of complaints, and he can point things out that are wrong, but he doesn't have any solutions. But when someone like Tucker Carlson comes out and sort of is critiquing the administration, that's not good news for them either, is it?
it's terrible. And you're right, though, Tucker doesn't have any solutions, and Tucker, I think, has gone to the dark side on Israel,
Yes.
and, that I we'd have to do a whole other show on why I think that's wrong, but, yeah, he's Tucker's not right about these things, but when you get somebody with a platform like Tucker
Mhm.
or Joe Rogan
Yes.
or, the doubts is creeping in there, and
Yeah.
and with Tucker, it's a lot worse than that,
Yeah.
but, yeah, and I think, a couple other brands that spring to mind. Ben
Mhm.
Shapiro, I think, has
Yes.
fallen into that group, and
Yep.
so Trump can only afford not too many of those people to be making that noise because these are the people that his base listens to,
Yes.
and, he's not acting like he realizes that. He's
Yeah.
acting like he's the only one that's the authorized spokesman for what MAGA is supposed to believe,
Mhm.
and he's not.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's something.
We made him. Let me change this around. He may think he made us, but we really made him. I mean, he
Yes.
tapped into something, and so he's gotta be mindful that, and I've done this because 'cause I've been a leader of so many
Yeah.
different organizations. You gotta be really careful to
Mhm.
understand what people are feeling,
Yes.
not just what they think.
That's a very astute observation. It's something that, I thought a lot about. We often think that people who come along who are, let's say, important in history,
Yeah,
that they sort of make the time. But the truth, I think, is more what you said, Bill, and that is that certain people come along at certain times and they are the person of the moment.
right.
But sometimes they think that they're the wave, but they're really not the wave. They're on a surfboard riding the wave, and anybody who's watched or has done surfing knows that you could fall off the surfboard, and the wave will just keep going. And sometimes that wave can crush you and drown you. And I hope that's not true with Donald Trump because my sense is that the Trump administration has great potential, that it's only begun to do some of the good things that it can do, not only for the United States, but also for the world. When I'm talking more specifically about the MAGA movement, which is kind of the wave that Donald Trump is riding. And so I would hate to see this sort of end the wave because that wave is very, very important in terms of fighting some of the evil that's going on in our world and that you talk about on your show. Would you agree?
He's credible. We got to we I know him, shaken hands, done things, been in some meet, but I'm not a guy that's gonna go say, "Donald, let's go sit down and have a cup of Diet Coke and talk together."
Well,
Um,
he likes to golf. That might be your in, Bill.
well, but he likes good golfers, and I'm not sure I'm there yet. But let's bring up one other guy that's a problem, and that's Elon Musk.
Yes, yes. The end of the
That's the other
bromance.
one that
Mhm,
I boy, I was just absolutely high as a kite when Musk was doing his thing, and we're getting
mhm.
these great reports from Doge, and you knew it was going to be volatile.
Yes.
But to have it breaking up this way and having we're now worried that Doge is not going to be, bringing much about that they discovered that ought to be brought about. So, and then Musk is not there, and he's starting up a third party, which we all know is a ridiculous idea.
Yeah,
That's a problem. I
yeah.
mean, the good thing he did is that he brought in a number of people from the tech community, although, that is that Biden was so bad for the tech community that he made a lot of people Republicans that otherwise would never have thought about it, and a lot of them are now in Washington. You
Mhm.
get a guy like David Sachs and his cyber czar. And so there's a lot of very talented tech people now in Washington who can bring a lot of good things to bear on policy and on
Mhm.
government. And now this Musk rift is potentially blowing that apart as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
and then he's got Steve Bannon,
yeah.
weighing in on I think Israel now. Steve is I think it's Israel. Anyway, I've
Yes,
lost track
he
of the
did.
figures,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
but we're not it's not a the choir has lost the tune.
Yes.
And we got we gotta get the music back in front of him, and he's gotta start, getting
Mhm.
that baton out, but he's also gotta understand that he's gotta play the music, that they wanna play.
Mhm, and that comes back to what you said about how he needs to listen. He needs to listen to
Yeah.
the some of the voices around him that are maybe not singing his praises, and that's difficult for anyone to do, but it's one of the key features of leadership, isn't it? I'm sure there's many times in the course of your leading your many businesses when you've appreciated the voices that came to you and said, "Hey, boss, maybe you shouldn't do that, or maybe we should look at this. And did you consider that?" That's very important to have those people around you, isn't it?
Well, in my investment committee, I always love to have people who are glass half empty people, real Eeyores, people who are negative. 'Cause I tend to be very positive, and I
Right.
could see the possibilities, and
Hmm.
that's not necessarily a good stance as an investor because you gotta really know the downside. So I like having people around who could tell me things
Hmm.
I didn't really wanna hear but were true. But the thing about Trump is he is a listener. I mean,
Yes.
he does listen to people, but maybe not every time or not on this.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, he does. He is someone who has a very strong sense of his vision of where he wants to go, and sometimes there's a temptation to block out the voices that are discordant with that vision. Maybe that's what we're seeing, but I wouldn't underestimate him.
No.
I think that my sense is he's probably going to find a way to pivot and adapt, and hopefully this he's going to come through this with flying colors. He seems to
I
have
think
done
you're
that
right.
every time before, with the possible
Yeah.
exception of the 2020 election. Of course, there were great forces working against him there. Well, Bill, this has been a great conversation. I knew it would be. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you. This is where we close off with our reading list. And when I researched you, I noticed you have your own reading list on your show. And what a reading list it is, folks. You should really check out the website for Bill's show. He's got a beautiful, I think he calls it the library. And some of my favorite books are there. And so I picked out two from your list, Bill. One is one called Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. It's hard
Sure.
to pick out the best C.S. Lewis book because they're all so wonderful. I'm partial to his books on Christianity. This
Yeah.
might be the best one. Either this one or the Screw Tape Letters are probably at the top of my list. But this is a great book for people who are thinking about faith, maybe are not sure about it, want to learn more about what Christianity is all about. But it's described as a forceful and accessible doctrine on Christian belief, which was first heard as part of some radio broadcasts that C.S. Lewis used to do back, I think, around the time of World War II. And it's a very readable book, and it breaks down Christianity and faith into bare essentials, but it also provides some great insight into just life, about living, about coping with things that get us down, that trouble us, about asking some of the great questions about why are we here? Does God love us? What happens when we die? Those answers are here, and it's a wonderful book. Again, it's on our reading list, but it's also on Bill's. The second book that I plucked from his list is one that I expect he knows very well. It's called Money, Greed, and God: Why Capitalism is the Solution and Not the Problem. And maybe, Bill, I'll ask you to describe that book and why you have it on your list.
Which one of my friends wrote that?
That is a book written by J.W.
Jay
Richards.
Richards? Yeah,
Yes.
Jay's a good guy. Jay's
Yeah.
PhD
Yeah.
is now I think he's now at Heritage. Yeah, Jay's he's a 1,000-watt IQ and knows everything, and he really, cutting through it, is teaches about the morality of markets and, the old remember, Wall Street when Gordon Gekko said greed is
Yes.
good.
Greed
Well,
is good.
they put a true statement in the mouth of the villain,
Right.
which is unfortunate, but, people acting in their self-interest to bring about an economic outcome is a good thing, not a bad
Right.
thing, and particularly if you operate within the guardrails of Christian morality and law, and he just ties it all together, and one of the things that's so annoying is that particularly with the Marxist about ready to take over New York City, people on our side have not done a good enough job explaining the morality of why we believe what we believe.
Yes.
And you're
Mhm.
not really we don't do a good enough job talking about why markets are a good thing, why capitalism a good thing, and then, of course, capitalism's a lousy label. It was given to free markets by that guy, Karl Marx.
Yeah.
And so you got your enemies
He was
giving you
not a
the
good
label.
guy. He was a
Not a
really
good
bad
guy.
guy.
He's a really bad man. There's a couple books, I think Paul Johnson wrote a book on called The
Yeah.
Intellectuals and talked about Karl
Yeah.
Marx's home life and how he treated his
He
wife.
is
You
a
don't
real loser. I mean, I read some of his
Yeah,
stuff in original
yeah,
German, and this guy is the worst racist, anti-Semite, hated
yeah,
black people.
yeah.
You know, if people only knew what a loser Karl Marx was, nobody
And so
would.
is Rousseau. I mean, so
Yeah,
are most of the
yeah,
guys that are the intellectual and moral roots of the bad stuff
yeah.
happening now. They were not good people.
No.
Anyway, so Jay's book touches on all of that, and, it's a favorite. I'd add a third favorite that you brought you I think I'm not sure it's on the list. It's an interview with, Lee Kuan Yew, who was the president of Singapore,
Oh,
and he
really?
was the one who created modern Singapore, and he was the one where I got the line that you can learn more in an hour-long conversation with somebody who really knows something than you
Uh-huh.
can from spending a week in the library. And because
I
he
think
turned
we've done
Singapore.
that today with you, Bill.
Well, I hope so, some. That'll be a third one. I It's an interview, and it's out there. It's exceptionally, he's an exceptionally wise man, tough man if you're a
Mhm.
leader. If you've got any kind of leadership position, that's a book I would put in my top 10.
Mhm, mhm. You know, it's interesting you talking about the capitalism and morality. I did a deep dive into Adam Smith once, and I was shocked to discover that he also wrote a treatise on morality in
Yeah.
addition to his famous book, The Wealth of Nations, and that Smith actually thought his treatise on morality was the better of the two. But it's very clear from reading Adam Smith that his invisible hand, to at least to my mind, was the hand of our Creator, of our God. And that is this invisible hand that works to the betterment of all. But in any event, Bill, it's been our pleasure to
This
have
is
you
great.
on our program. Just a joy to speak with you and to learn more about you. And please, I wish you much success with all of your philanthropic work, and also especially with your podcast. I've watched a few episodes; it's wonderful. Keep up the great work. Uh,
Well, let's keep going with this because I think some point we need to do a home and away because you've got a very interesting background with what you've done with I think with Indians and
yeah,
reservation and all that culture.
yeah.
I don't know enough.
I fought a lot of the COVID cases in Canada as well.
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
enough about that, and I know you're probably one of the leading, defense attorneys
Mm.
in Canada. Didn't you aren't you sort of in the didn't I
That's
hear
my
you're one
thing.
of the top 50 lawyers in Canada, which
That's
is
what that's
a
what
pretty
they
big deal?
say.
So
I'm
this
on
is
a I'm on a list.
you're on the right list.
Yeah.
No, we need to do a home and away and
Yeah. Oh,
keep
I'd
this
love to be on
dialogue
your
going.
I'd love to come back and talk to your viewers,
Yeah, let's do that.
yeah, I'd enjoy that very much, but thank you so
Well,
much, Bill, for
let's
being on
switch
our
hats and I'll interview
yeah,
you.
and I'm gonna take you up on your invitation to CPAC. I gotta get inside
Oh, yeah.
the
Oh, that'll
room
happen.
to see that. That
That'll
is a
happen.
phenomenal, thing that you're doing there.
We'll get you a good
Uh,
seat.
yeah, but thank you so much for being our special guest. It's been a joy to meet you and talk with you, and best of luck with all of, the work that you're doing. Thanks very much for being our special guest here today.
Great, thanks.